Okay, hi everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. I think I've covered all the time zones for all of the different people we have here. Welcome to our webinar on social media and digital signage. It's a follow-up from Digital Signage Expo. My name's Mark Rifkin, and a brief introduction. I've been with Scala almost 20 years now, and I've worked on a whole variety of customer projects from integration, device control, content design, and training. And I teach the advanced training classes, so if you're interested in learning about design and programming with Scala to do more advanced applications, sign up for our training classes and you can learn that. I'm also responsible for the script toolkit library. These are some components we've built to help people build more sophisticated solutions using Scala to do things like data integration and device control. So we kind of solve some of the technical challenges so that you can focus on making a proper solution for your customers. So let's talk about what we're going to cover today. First off, we're going to talk about social media and digital signage and how they interact with each other, how to integrate with them. And part of doing that requires an understanding of what it takes to make good content. So we'll discuss that and give some examples. We'll talk about the challenges working with social media, and you know, it has a unique aspects of its own compared to other types of data you might want to put on your screens. And we'll give a little walkthrough of how the whole process goes, the workflow of integrating with Scala. How do you create something that could show a Twitter feed or a Facebook or something like that? We'll have a summary to wrap it up, and then we'll open up the floor for questions. So, you know, during the webinar, if you have questions, there's a pop-out in GoToMeeting where you can type in a question. We'll collect those, and at the end, we'll go through as many as we have time for. All right, so let's get started. So, you know, talking about social media, what do we mean? We're talking about places that people go online to share information. You know, they're sharing posts, photos, comments about products, videos. This is a common communication platform for everybody, including consumers and marketers. You know, you have Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, Pinterest, Flickr. You know, a lot of these feeds have RSS components to them. People check in with Foursquare. They take pictures with Instagram and do things on Google+. All these areas are converging, and they're acting as a way for people to communicate. And with digital signage, you want to be able to extend that conversation to the store or to your location with content on the screen. Now, to pull all this together, you kind of need some kind of bigger picture, an integrated strategy to have a cohesive message going out to your audience. So when you're thinking about that, you know, you take a step back and think, well, we have traditional media, print, TV, etc. You have web, and most companies today have a social media manager or department that handles communication with you know, their audience based on what networks they're on. And if you're one of our customers, you also have a digital signage person, although sometimes that person is usually one of these other people given a second job, and now they have to do two jobs at once. Hopefully someday digital signage will get its own, you know, position within a company, but it tends to be assigned to someone else, like the web person or a marketing person. But today it's becoming more and more critical to, you know, take into account social and digital signage, because what's happening is that everyone's walking into your locations or your stores and they already have a screen with them. They're already carrying a screen that has everything that's important to them. Their contacts, their postings, their pictures, their email. And with digital signage, you're now essentially competing for their attention. You will need to have something on the screen that's going to complement or interact with what's on their phone. And you can see from, you know, this chart here, you know, the majority of people using phones and tablets are doing things that are social related. So they're looking at posts, they're accessing videos, they're posting their own status. So, you know, not just social, but mobile as well. You have to take those into account when you're deciding what's going to go on your screens. So how do you compete for this attention? The best thing you can do with digital signage is figure out what your content strategy is going to be. So you need to have content that's going to be engaging, so it's got to be visually interesting, eye-catching, you know, not too distracting. It's got to be relevant, so it's got to be targeted to the time and location that people are watching the content. Otherwise, they're not going to feel it's important for them to look at. Then it's got to be dynamic as well. So if it's relevant, it's probably also dynamic. But dynamic means data-driven. It's got to be pulling in something that's not just the same loop of content over and over again in every location that people will eventually tune out. So some examples, this is a project that I worked on a couple years back, the Sprint Studio store in Kansas City. They have dozens of screens in the store. All of them are showing advertising about products and accessories. Some of them are interactive. There's a check-in system. If they're busy when you show up, you can put your name in, and when they're ready to see you at the service desk, your name flies around all the screens in the store. And the whole system is integrated with the store's lighting and sound system, so they have total control over the entire store environment, and they can even play like a giant ad that takes over every single screen and then go back to the normal playlist. It's a pretty powerful installation, but it's a good example of engaging content. Something that's more along the lines of relevant targeting. This other project we worked on a couple years back was a network of gas station fuel pumps. Like 90% of the content here was targeted, because each gas station had different attributes. Some of them had car wash, some had a coffee shop, they had different services. Everything had to be targeted based on that location, so they weren't promoting something that you couldn't actually access. We did a couple custom programming projects for them. One of them was to promote the nearest location of a restaurant food chain near that specific gas station. So while you were there, it would say, oh, by the way, the nearest location for this restaurant is here, down the block to the right. So again, dynamic and targeted. Another example, this one I didn't work on, but I really admire the work of the partner that does these kind of projects. This is Showcase Cinema in the UK. They did an awesome job with data integration, bringing in the box office schedules. They have menu boards for the concession areas, and the overall design of the signage really complements the decor and atmosphere of the theater. Very modern look. So these are examples of digital signage in general. We want to now bring the focus back to social media. How does this apply to social media? Well, when you're looking at what's going on Twitter or Facebook with relation to what's going on in a store, one thing you can do simply is allow people to see what's going on the screen. And the most common example of this is the Twitter wall. If you've been to Scala's booth at, excuse me, if you've been to Scala's booth at any trade shows, you've probably seen a Twitter wall or Facebook wall where we have posts going on. These posts come from people who are tweeting, and it's filtered based on a tag or event or location. It could be a conference, a film festival. Basically you're showing what's going on in the cloud on the screen. But another more common example I've seen is using social media as a way for advertisers or sponsors to place content into their digital signage networks. So instead of having to promote a product on Facebook and then you go over to Scala and do the thing on Scala, you could have an advertisement made in Scala that pulls a post or an image from an album or whatever from a Facebook or Twitter post and uses that as part of its content. It doesn't even have to look like a tweet. It's using the content from the post as the content for the ad. And that way it's more efficient. You're delivering the same message to two different places, and it's more effective because it's consistent. People will see the same message on the social media as they see on the screen. Another more specific example would be customer service. A lot of companies that have retail or service or technology kind of product, they'll typically have a separate Twitter account for technical support or service than they do for their public relations. And people will use that to get help, with an airline or a computer product or something like that. If you have like a retail presence, you could have a screen with that feed on there, and people can see questions and answers while they're waiting in line, maybe to talk to somebody. They might actually get their question answered before they get to the front of the line and be able to move on without having to wait too long. A specific example of showing content on a screen would be For Food. This is an installation in New York City. They have a beautiful menu board that's dynamic and user-driven. And then if you can look, let's see, where's my mouse here? Here's the menu board. And over here, just behind this column, is a giant video screen with a Twitter wall. So again, they're showing posts from For Food. They're showing what people are doing in the location, bringing that conversation from a phone to a big screen and making it part of the overall decoration or appearance of the store. Now, all these things are great, but with traditional digital signage practices here, the experience of the content ends when the person walks away from the screen. So basically, if it's 5 seconds, you have 5 seconds to get your message across, and that's it. So what you would love to have is a way to extend that by giving them something they can take away with them and be able to read it either later or as they're walking away. And that's basically, how do we take this content with you? Well, you've got the phone, and it's a pretty powerful computer. So you could do things like show QR codes and have NFC tags embedded in the screen to let people continue their conversation or communication beyond just the 5 seconds they see the screen. One of the powerful things about Scala is that our playback engine is really powerful and robust, and it renders everything in real time, and it's very programmable. So, for instance, we can make a Twitter feed that if it detects a URL in the Twitter feed, it'll generate a QR code on the fly that you could scan and read that article. Because honestly, no one's going to sit there and type in this URL from their phone, but they would probably fire up a QR code scanning app and take a snapshot of this and maybe read it later when they're traveling. NFC is becoming more popular. NFC tags kind of work like QR codes, but they're wireless and don't require line of sight. So you could swipe your phone and maybe have something that could generate a coupon, maybe 20% off for the next hour. Could have product information about an advertisement that you're watching, or it could trigger a check-in with your Facebook or Foursquare app, so you don't have to manually bring it out. You could just swipe your phone by the tag area, and it would automatically run that app on your phone. That's one level. Let's take this up one more step here. So, if you've interacted with it by taking the media on your phone, what if you could use your phone to interact with what's on the screen? That actually might give people a reason to stick around a little bit longer and actually see what's going to happen. Obviously you could do things like, people could tweet and see their tweet show up on the screen. That's kind of got a novelty factor. But this example here is something we ran at a trade show recently, where we're taking product shots from a Facebook photo album and showing how many likes each product has. So what's neat about this is the audience for this content is not just the person standing in front of the screen, but it's the millions of people on Facebook who are also looking at these things and judging whether they are interested in these topics or products or not. And what can happen is if I walk into the store and I see the middle watch there has 11,000 likes, the top one's got 6,500, the bottom one's got 87, the 11,000 one looks pretty cool, I might actually go and buy it. So you're talking about the ability to influence purchasing behavior because of popularity, and then if I buy it, I can go back to the screen, and if you can see the directions down here, there'll be a QR code I could scan and say, hey, I just bought this watch. And now everybody outside the store, not just the people around me, know that I got this watch, and the popularity of that product happens. So it's kind of a really cool feedback loop that you can create. And this is just scratching the surface. Most of these social networks have so much data in them, from photos to geographic locations, likes and preferences. I'm sure there's a lot of cool things that we could come up with. One thing we did do is another demo. This is a demo where the QR code here is generated on the fly, and it's tailored. It's got a code that identifies this specific screen. So if I were looking at a screen at a store, this QR code would tell the app that I'm launching which screen I'm actually looking at and allow me to choose different content to play on that screen. And because potentially this could be an app, if you're a retailer and you have your own private app, you could launch that, or you could launch a mobile web page. That gives you the ability to track who's looking at what content on what screens in your stores, and you can figure out which products are more popular, which ones people want to share. In this case, it's showing get the brochure, but there could easily be a tweet this button. So you could scan the QR code, watch a video, and then tweet the video or post it on Facebook, and you've now created a wider audience for the people, for the advertising, than just the person who was looking at that one screen. So let's look at some challenges in working with social media. It's an interesting little thing because it's based on people. It's not just like a news or RSS feed or the weather. It's coming from sources, so it could be anywhere. So obviously the thing that people first think about is, oh, what if someone puts some profanity on my screen? Well, we could set up a filter. All the systems like Scala's, we have word filters, but I can guarantee you that, for every filtering system you can come up with, there's someone else out there with more free time than you who will figure out how to work their way around it. So you just have to evaluate your risk on what you're willing to let appear on your screen if you're not going to manually approve every single message. And that's what a lot of people do. I mean, any kind of large venue, LED, or retail display, they're not allowing anything show up on there. There are a few cases where maybe at a conference, film festivals, or small social events where it's okay to let something slip by. That's fine. But still, one of the things I point out to people is you still might want to have some kind of oversight, because it's not just obscenities you have to worry about, it's annoyances. I took this snapshot of a Instagram one day where someone just decided to mash the keyboard, and there's nothing offensive in there, but it'd really be annoying if it showed up on your screens in your stores. So it's just another thing you got to take into account when you're deciding whether you want to allow just anybody to post on your screen. Another trick we did for an event where there were certain people who were kind of high-profile attendees, we created a Twitter list of those people only, and their tweets would appear on the screen instead of just anyone who posted with the same hashtag. So that's another idea you could do. That way you're kind of limiting the range of people that can access the screen. Another issue to deal with is a more technical area, bandwidth. Almost all the social media feeds have authentication and rate limit restrictions on how you can access their feed. And they're doing this to measure and control how their data is being used. And all it does is create more hoops to jump through in order to be able to access and display this stuff on your digital signage. They almost all require some kind of authentication where your digital signage app has to be approved by someone who's a registered client on the network. Typically, that client is yourself. If you have your own corporate account, you would use that to approve your digital signage application. But it's just one more step to go through instead of just being able to load something and press play. It's a little more setup work required. They have bandwidth limits. So Twitter, for instance, has a restriction on how many times you can access their API in a given amount of time. The one way to get around that is, instead of having all of your players, if you have 100 players, instead of all of them hitting the same API request, you could pull at the server level and then trickle down to the players. And that might create a slight lag time. People are expecting to watch their tweets show up on the screen. So what you could do, just to give a better feel that there's something happening, is you can download, say, 20 or 30 at a time, and then play so many at a time. Maybe play 5 at a time, then 5 at a time, and then 5 minutes later you pull down another 20. Depends on how many tweets are going on about this product, how popular things are. In some locations, if it's an event, maybe like a convention, there's going to be a lot of traffic going on. But if it's a fixed retail location, the level of traffic may vary. So you want to have something that can accommodate, both the high traffic days and then the days where it's kind of dry. The last two items here are just good practice in any digital signage. Anytime you're pulling down content or data, you want to cache locally and have a fallback plan. That means that when you're pulling down a data feed, you don't want to rely on having a constant network connection. You want the ability to pull down the data, save it locally, and then display it from the hard drive until the next time you pull down the data. And that way, if the network connection dies, routers do die, network connections do fail, you don't want your screens to go blank or show some obnoxious error message on the screen. And then if you can't reach the data at all, you want to be able to have a fallback plan. Do you want it to show a message saying please stand by? Do you want to have it just not show anything and skip to the next thing in the playlist? Have some kind of plan. Whenever I'm developing projects for customers, one thing I'll do is I'll set up a player, get it running the content, and then pull the network cable and make sure that it's able to gracefully exit whatever it was doing and keep playing gracefully. You don't want screens to look bad, because then pictures of those end up on Facebook or Instagram. That can be embarrassing. All right, so those are some of the issues. Let's give like an overview of integrating with Scala. Then I'm going to give like a top-level diagram and a little workflow. For those of you that are intimately familiar with Scala, and some of you are, you could probably go get a cup of coffee and come back in a minute, and you won't miss too much. You'll come back for the Q&A. But for those of you who are evaluating Scala, looking at this as a solution, let me give you the big picture of things here. We'll start with the network diagram. So the kind of the brain of the Scala network is the content manager. This is where all the media gets uploaded and published to. This is where the scheduling is done, the playlists are created, and where players are monitored. And it's a server-based application, so it's either installed on a server at your location, or it's hosted somewhere, hosted by Scala or an internet provider, but it's a remote server application that people log into and work with. And if you're playing videos, you would log into that web page, upload the video, put it in a playlist, schedule it, and wait for it to show up on your screens. If you're doing things that require data integration, whether it's event schedules or social media or RSS feeds, you're going to use our design tool, Designer. And this lets you create kind of a template, a framework, the layout of the screen, and create placeholders for the data, and then do some programming on the back end to actually pull in that data and fill in the spots. And we use the same mechanism for data as we do for what we call templates and messages. So you could have a nice intricate design layout that someone creates in Designer, publishes, and then in Content Manager, another person can log in and fill in the blanks. Maybe it's welcome visitors, and they put in the name of the people visiting your store or office that day. Or it could be a manager special where each manager at each location could put in their own content. But that same mechanism in Designer for making things that are user-driven or data-driven is all done in Designer. We're going to go through that in a few steps here in a minute. When you're talking about data integration, though, your data sources are out here somewhere, and like we talked about with Twitter, with rate limiting and bandwidth issues, you may have to pull the data directly into Content Manager and then distribute it out to the players. We have some situations where the players aren't even connected to the internet because of security concerns. So in this case, you would have to pull it in centrally and distribute it out on your private network. In cases where it is possible, you can do it. You can pull to the players directly. So maybe you're showing like local traffic or weather, and the players are on the internet, and it's been set up properly so the players are not exposed. You can do it either way. Our software doesn't make any preference for you about how this data can work. You can do both if you have to, based on the type of data and the type of network that you have. So it's not a restriction one way or the other. When it comes to the media that you're using, we support a wide variety of formats. Typical images, JPEGs and PNGs, videos. You can do H.264 video. We support Flash. One of our technology partners is a company called Flypaper, and they let you make little Flash widgets or components that you can embed in Scala. So you can make things like news tickers and sports scores and time and date and analog clocks and things like that. And then, of course, there's our own format, Scala, made in Designer. And these last two are both Scala. You can make a standalone application in Scala, or you can make a template where people can fill in the blanks. So this is Designer, and we're in the process of making a Twitter page. So we pick the text that we want to have. We create the layout, the graphics. When you're working with text in Designer, it's like a full drag-and-drop graphical interface. So you've got your fonts, visual effects, transitions, and you put in placeholders for things that you want to change later on. And these things, like I said, they can be human-driven or they could be data-driven. So we're going to make this data-driven because we're doing a Twitter feed. But the neat thing about this is that we've created a workflow where the artist can work in Designer and not have to worry about the programming. The programming part kind of gets added later. And then on the other end of the workflow, another person who doesn't have to worry about either the programming or the design fills in the blanks. So the marketing person or the social media manager can go into this page in Content Manager, put in, I want to show a Scala feed, I want it to show from the Scala account, we're going to pull in 5 at a time, we're going to loop all of them, and I want this blue background, or whatever background that you choose. So we've kind of divided up the workflow so that the artist worries about the design, the marketing person fills in the blanks, and between these two steps there's some programming that gets merged in there that does the actual data retrieval. But we try not to let either the artist or the manager have to deal with the technical issues. They just want to be able to say, I want to show this feed on the screen. And that's what it would look like. So here it's playing, and what's kind of neat about this, it's generated a QR code based on the URL that was in the tweet. It's got different colors for the @mention and the hashtags. It's kind of subtle. It's like a different shade of gray. We can make it more obvious. It's bringing in the icon from the profile. All these things are being done. But the key thing about all this is that it all begins here in Designer in a free-form layout. So it doesn't have to look the same as every other Twitter feed and every other digital signage application. You really have full creative control here. So that's Twitter. Here's an example with Instagram, kind of replicating what they do on their web profile pages, pulling in a feed of images and then showing them. Here's an application we did for Facebook, pulling images sequentially from a album on Facebook and showing you the image, the caption for the image, and the number of people who liked it, and also giving you the chance to like it yourself. And the QR code would basically trigger Facebook on your phone so that you would be able to access that particular photo and decide if you want to like it or comment about it. So those are a bunch of examples. Let's wrap it up, and then we can get some questions. Just to pull things all together here, we talked about having a communication strategy. So that means, thinking about how all these different media work together. You've got traditional media, web, social, and digital signage. And underlying all that is the fact that people are carrying around mobile phones, so you want to give them a reason to look at the screen and use their phone to somehow interact with what's on that screen. And we talked about the principles of good content, which would mean it has to be engaging, relevant, and dynamic in order to really capture attention. It takes a lot of work to come up with that, but I think the part of the work to make something dynamic is automating things so you're not manually creating lots of content yourself. And the examples about being able to show and experience digital signage and social media together and kind of giving that feedback loop so that people in the store and people on social media in general kind of are the same audience. They're brought to the same level so that you're not just thinking about what happens in the store and then what happens on the internet. They're together. And then we went through the designer workflow with how to create a template, let someone else fill in the blanks, and then see what the results look like. So hopefully during this webinar I've answered your questions. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention this part. So can I mention this with designer? You have you're basically being given a creative canvas to work with our software, and to just show a very linear feed of posts on a social network is really not taking full advantage of the product. And you really should talk to Scala. We have experts that have been with the company for years, and we've done so many applications now. We could probably help come up with a customized idea that might take advantage of your particular business, product, and audience that would be more than just a sequential list of postings. A game of some kind or some kind of thing that's more interactive. So with that in mind, I want to see if anybody has any questions. Let's see. Give me a second here. Let's see. So I'm looking at the questions that we've got in here. HTML compatible template and designer. I'm not sure. Let me check this other one. All right. So one of the questions is about what kind of scripts are available to work with these things. Before I answer that question directly, the indirect answer is today, currently, some of the feeds out there do have an RSS component. So Twitter still has an RSS feature. I see another question just came in. Good. And with Instagram, there are services like Webstagram where you can generate a RSS component from a search, let's say on Instagram. So using our standard RSS script, you could actually bring up a lot of these feeds, and those things are available on a developer wiki that we have. But the main thing is, contact Scala, and we'll point you in the right direction rather than me giving you URLs here. Eventually, though, we're going to have a proper set of scripts, like a script toolkit that deals with these social feeds directly. Let's see. Let me go back up to the top here. Give me 1 second here. So someone's asking about Scala being integrated with a queuing system, take a number systems, and yeah, where the message would be sent to your smartphone. That's potentially possible. There might be solutions that kind of do that part of it, the non-digital signage part of it, that Scala could integrate with. Otherwise, our services group would have to build that whole component for you. So if you wanted to have something where there's a queuing system and you could somehow use your phone to check in, and then your phone would actually tell you that that you're ready to be seen at the customer counter. That's all possible with today's technology, but it's something that would have to be either developed or integrated with. Let's see, generating NFC codes on the fly. Well, NFC, the tags themselves, if you're doing a fixed tag, they have to be written to, and then it's that URL or content is stuck in the tag. It's possible to have an active NFC tag that's kind of defined by a device, and potentially that could be generated on the fly, or at least be programmed to be targeted to a specific player. So at least if it has the player's identification in it, once the person scans it, it takes them to an application that says, so-and-so just scanned this tag from this player. Then the dynamic part of it can take over. So as long as you know where the tag was scanned, you can then generate something that's relevant to that particular location. Let's see. Not sure what that one means. As far as how long till these toolkits will be available, we're trying to get them out as soon as possible. With the last batch of trade shows, it kind of took a lot of time away from this kind of ongoing development. And now, if you've probably seen the webinar, if you've seen Scala at ISE and DSE, we're working on a new version of the whole software. And there are kind of features I'm looking forward to in there that I might want to take advantage of. So kind of deciding whether to wait or release them sooner. Let's see, integrating with Facebook and Instagram together. Let's see. It's certainly possible. I mean, you can combine scripts that work with both feeds, and I believe that where have I seen this now? Well, you can post Instagram pictures on Facebook, but then it ends up in a Facebook album. I'd have to think about that one. These would be good questions to ask in a one-to-one conversation. Let's see, any other questions that I can answer quickly? Oh. Okay, cool. One other thing I thought of that, if you've seen the webinar about our next generation product, there's a whole new avenue about to open up about being able to use HTML inside of Scala. So it's gonna change the equation a little bit. Everything won't have to be developed in Scala, but there'll be certain things that would still be definitely more effective in our product. But it might, if there are pre-existing tools for making web pages that can show these kind of social media, it'll be a little easier for people to get started if they're already familiar with web programming. Okay, so I think we've gone through our questions. So I want to wrap this up and thank everybody for attending. And please stay in touch with us. And if you have any other questions afterwards, usually, whenever I'm having a conference call or something, usually think of a question right after you hang up the phone. Just feel free to contact us anytime. Thanks.